The USS Defiance shook violently as another blast hit its damaged hull. Sparks flew from broken control panels and the lights flickered on and off. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Marine Sergeant Jake Morrison held onto a twisted piece of railing as the ship tilted to one side. "All hands abandon ship," came the voice over the speakers. The captain's words were calm, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. The Defiance was dying and everyone knew it. Jake wiped blood from a cut on his forehead and looked around the corridor. Bodies of his fellow Marines lay scattered on the floor. Some were moving and groaning in pain. Others would never move again. The Zephyrian attack had come without warning and hit them hard. "Come on, Stevens. We need to move," Jake said to the young Marine next to him. The kid was holding his arm where a piece of metal had cut deep. Blood seeped through his fingers. "I can't feel my arm, Sergeant," Stevens said. His voice was shaky, and his face was white from blood loss. Jake grabbed Stevens and pulled him to his feet. "You don't need to feel it, you just need to move it. The escape pods are 3 decks down." They made their way through the broken ship. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. The deck was covered with debris and broken glass. Jake could hear the sounds of other survivors making their way to the escape pods. Some were crying, some were calling for help. The ship groaned around them like a wounded animal. When they reached the escape pod bay, Jake saw that most of the pods were already gone. Only 2 remained. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez was helping the last group of wounded into one pod. "Morrison, get in here!" Rodriguez shouted over the noise of alarms and breaking metal. Jake helped Stevens into the pod and then stopped. Something cold settled in his stomach. The ship's AI core was still active. It contained all the classified information about human military operations, defense codes, colony locations, troop movements, everything the Zephyrians would need to finish off what was left of humanity. "Sir, the AI core is still online," Jake said to Rodriguez. The lieutenant, commander's face went pale. "The auto-destruct should have triggered when we gave the abandoned ship order." "The system must be damaged," Jake said. "Someone needs to go to the core and destroy it manually." Rodriguez looked at the pod full of wounded men, and then back at Jake. "We don't have time. The Zephyrian boarding ships are almost here." "Then go," Jake said. "I'll take care of the core." "That's an order, Morrison. Get in the pod." Jake stepped back from the pod door. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't do that." Before Rodriguez could argue, Jake hit the pod's emergency launch button. The door sealed shut, and the pod shot out into space. Rodriguez's angry face disappeared behind the thick metal door. Jake turned and ran toward the ship's core. The corridors were empty now except for the dead. His boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. The ship shuddered again, and Jake heard the sound of cutting tools. The Zephyrians were burning through the hull. The AI core was located in the center of the ship, protected by thick walls and security doors. Jake's access code still worked, and the doors opened for him. Inside, the core hummed with blue light. Screens showed data flowing in streams of numbers and letters. Jake pulled out his plasma cutter and began working on the core's main processing unit. The metal was tough and the work was slow. Sweat dripped down his face as he cut through layer after layer of protective shielding. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Heavy footsteps that didn't belong to humans. Jake worked faster, his hands moving the plasma cutter in quick, precise cuts. He was almost through to the main processor when the door behind him exploded inward. 3 Zephyrian soldiers came through the smoke. They were tall creatures, at least 8 feet high, with bodies covered in what looked like living crystal. Their armor shifted colors from blue to green to purple. They carried weapons that glowed with energy. The lead soldier spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "Human, step away from the device." Jake kept cutting. "Sorry, but I'm a little busy right now." One of the soldiers raised his weapon. Energy crackled around its tip. "Move away or we will kill you." Jake looked at the core. He was so close. Just a few more seconds and the main processor would be destroyed. All the secrets would die with him. The soldier fired. Pain shot through Jake's shoulder as the energy bolt hit him. He dropped the plasma cutter and fell to his knees. The smell of burned flesh filled his nose. More Zephyrian soldiers poured into the room. They surrounded Jake, their weapons pointed at him. One of them picked up the plasma cutter and examined the damage to the core. "The device is still functional," the soldier reported in their grinding language. The human failed. Jake tried to stand, but another energy bolt hit his leg. He collapsed completely, his vision going dark around the edges. Strong hands grabbed his arms and dragged him out of the core room. The next thing Jake knew, he was in a transport ship flying through space. His wounds had been treated, but he was chained to the wall. Through a small window, he could see the wreckage of the USS Defiance floating in space. The Zephyrian flagship, the Eternal Dominion, hung nearby like a massive predator. The transport docked with the flagship, and Jake was dragged through corridors that looked like they were carved from living rock. Zephyrian soldiers lined the walls, their crystal armor reflecting the strange light that came from the ceiling. They watched, Jake with eyes that showed no emotion. Finally, Jake was brought to a huge chamber with a throne made of some kind of black metal. On the throne sat the largest Zephyrian Jake had ever seen. This one's armor was different, shifting through colors Jake had no names for. Patterns of light moved across the surface like liquid fire. "I am Queen Vexhai," the creature said. Her voice was deeper than the others, with a sound like distant thunder. "You are the human who tried to destroy your ship's brain." Jake raised his head and looked directly at her. Despite his pain and exhaustion, he managed to speak clearly. "That's right." The queen leaned forward on her throne. "You failed. We now have access to all your military secrets. Your species will fall within days." "Maybe," Jake said, "but you'll still have to fight for every inch." Queen Vexhai made a sound that might have been laughter. "Look at you, human. You are small and weak. Your skin is soft and easily damaged. You bleed when touched by the smallest weapon. How can such pathetic creatures think to stand against us?" Jake said nothing. He just stared back at her with steady eyes. "We are Zephyrians," the queen continued. "Our bodies are living armor. Our strength is 10 times yours. Our weapons can destroy your ships with single shots. We are superior in every way." Still, Jake remained silent. The queen's armor shifted to deep red, which Jake guessed meant anger. "Take him to the interrogation chambers. Break his mind and make him tell us everything about human defenses. When he has served his purpose, execute him publicly so the other prisoners can see what happens to those who defy us." As the guards dragged Jake away, Queen Vexhai called after him. "You should have stayed in your escape pod, little human. Now you will die slowly and in great pain." Jake managed one last look back at the queen before the chamber doors closed. Even through his pain, even facing certain death, his eyes showed no fear, only a quiet determination that seemed to puzzle the alien ruler. The interrogation chamber was a room carved from what looked like living crystal. The walls pulsed with a soft blue light that made Jake's head hurt. He was strapped to a chair that seemed to be grown from the floor rather than built. Metal bands, held his arms and legs in place. A Zephyrian interrogator entered the room. This one was smaller than the queen, but still towered over Jake. Its armor was a dull gray color, and various tools hung from its belt. When it spoke, its voice had a hissing quality that made Jake's skin crawl. "Human, I am Interrogator Kelnash. You will tell me everything about your military codes and defense systems." Jake looked up at the creature and said nothing. His shoulder throbbed where the energy weapon had hit him. His leg ached from the second shot, but he kept his mouth shut. Kelnash picked up a device that looked like a metal spider with glowing legs. "This is a neural probe. It will dig into your brain and pull out your memories. The process is very painful for humans. You can avoid this pain by simply talking." "I don't have anything to say," Jake replied. The interrogator placed the device on Jake's forehead. Immediately, white-hot pain shot through his skull. It felt like someone was driving nails into his brain. Jake gritted his teeth and tried not to scream. Images flashed through his mind. The probe was searching through his memories, looking for military information. Jake focused on other things: his childhood home, his mother's cooking, the sound of rain on the roof. Anything but military secrets. After what felt like hours, Kelnash removed the device. Jake's head felt like it was splitting apart. Blood ran from his nose. "Interesting," the interrogator said. "Your mind has barriers. You have been trained to resist mental intrusion, but we have other methods." Over the next 3 days, Jake endured torture that would have broken most people. The Zephyrians used pain amplifiers that made every nerve in his body feel like it was on fire. They used fear inducers that filled his mind with terrible visions. They tried starvation, sleep deprivation, and psychological warfare. But Jake's military training held. He had been through Seer School, where they taught soldiers how to survive capture and resist interrogation. More than that, he had something the Zephyrians didn't understand. He had a reason to stay strong that went beyond his own survival. Between torture sessions, Jake was thrown into a holding cell with other human prisoners. The cell was barely big enough for 6 people, but held 12. They were crammed together, on a floor that was cold and damp. Most of the other prisoners had given up hope. They sat in corners and stared at nothing. Some cried quietly, others talked to themselves. But one woman sat straight and alert despite her obvious injuries. "You're the Marine from the Defiance," she said when she saw Jake. "I'm Dr. Lisa Grant. I was on a research ship when they captured us." Jake nodded. "How long have you been here?" 6 weeks, Lisa said. "I've seen a lot of prisoners come and go. Most don't last as long as you have." "What do you mean?" Lisa looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "The Zephyrians don't understand humans at all. They think we're just weak animals. They can't figure out why we keep fighting when we're obviously outmatched." "Because we don't have a choice," Jake said. "Exactly. But they don't see it that way. In Zephyrian society, everything is based on physical strength and combat ability. The strongest rule over the weaker ones. It's been that way for thousands of years." Jake winced as he shifted position. His tortured body was a mass of pain. "So they think we should just surrender because they're stronger?" "Right. To them, continuing to fight when you're outmatched isn't brave. It's stupid. They literally cannot understand why humans would choose death over slavery." Lisa explained more about Zephyrian culture. Their society was divided into strict levels based on how well someone could fight. Warriors were at the top, followed by builders and workers. At the bottom were the weak and injured, who were basically treated like slaves. Queen Vexhai has never lost a personal fight, Lisa continued. She became queen by defeating the previous ruler in single combat. To her, might makes right. Always. What about their technology, their weapons? They didn't invent most of it themselves. They conquered other species and took their technology. The Zephyrians are good at fighting and organizing, but they're not particularly creative or innovative. Jake thought about this. It explained a lot about how the Zephyrians fought. They relied on overwhelming force and superior technology. But their tactics were predictable. Human forces had been able to score some victories by using unexpected strategies. The thing is, Lisa said quietly, they're starting to get frustrated. This war has gone on longer than they expected. They thought humans would surrender after losing a few major battles. But we didn't. No, we didn't. And every time they destroy one of our ships or colonies, 10 more seem to appear. They can't understand where we keep getting reinforcements. From? Jake smiled grimly. Because they don't understand how humans work. When they attack one of our colonies, the survivors don't give up. They get angry. They want revenge. Exactly. But Queen Vexhai thinks she's dealing with a normal military hierarchy. Cut off the head and the body dies. She doesn't realize that. Human resistance is more like a forest fire. The more you try to stamp it out, the more it spreads. On his 4th day in the cell, Jake was dragged back to the interrogation chamber. This time, interrogator Kel Nash looked frustrated. Its armor had shifted to an angry red color. You continue to resist, it said. This is pointless. We will break you eventually. Maybe, Jake said. But you're running out of time. What do you mean? Jake managed a weak smile. How many human ships have attacked your supply lines in the last week? How many of your colonies have gone silent? You're not winning this war as easily as you thought you would. The interrogator's armor flashed brighter red. We are superior in every way. We will crush your pathetic species. Then why haven't you done it yet? Kel Nash raised a pain inducer but then stopped. For a moment, it seemed uncertain. You humans fight without honor. You use tricks and deception instead of meeting us in honest combat. We use whatever works, Jake said. That's the difference between us and you. You fight the way you think you're supposed to fight. We fight to win. The interrogator put down the device and left the chamber without another word. That night in the cell, Lisa noticed that Jake seemed different. Despite the torture, despite the hopeless situation, he was alert and focused. What are you thinking? About? She asked. Jake looked at the other prisoners. They were broken, defeated. But maybe that could change. I'm thinking about what you told me, about how the Queen doesn't understand humans. What about it? Maybe it's time someone explained it to her. Lisa stared at him. You can't be serious. She'll kill you. Jake leaned back against the cold wall. His body hurt, but his mind was clear. She's going to kill me anyway, but maybe before she does, I can give her something to think about. Like what? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the truth about what she's really fighting. Jake woke to the sound of heavy footsteps outside the cell. The other prisoners stirred nervously as Zephyrian guards approached. Jake had been expecting this. After his conversation with interrogator Kel Nash, he knew his time was running out. The cell door opened with a grinding sound. 4 guards entered, their crystal armor glowing in the dim light. The lead guard pointed at Jake with a weapon that hummed with energy. The human marine will come with us, the guard said in its grinding voice. Jake struggled to stand. 5 days of torture had left him weak and unsteady. His legs shook as he got to his feet. Lisa grabbed his arm to help support him. Where are you taking him? she asked. The guard ignored her and gestured for Jake to move. As he was led from the cell, Jake heard Lisa whisper, "Remember what I told you about their culture?" The guards marched Jake through corridors he had never seen before. These were wider than the prison areas, with high ceilings that curved overhead like the inside of a giant shell. The walls were decorated with carvings that showed Zephyrian warriors in battle. In every carving, the Zephyrians were winning. They passed other Zephyrians who stopped to stare at Jake. He could hear them talking in their grinding language, but he didn't understand the words. Their tone was clear enough, though. They sounded amused, like they were looking at some kind of strange animal. Finally, the guards brought Jake to a massive set of doors made from black metal. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, glowing, with a pale green light. The doors opened slowly, revealing a huge chamber beyond. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The chamber was enormous, bigger than a football stadium. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Rows of seats carved from stone rose up the walls, and every seat was filled with Zephyrians. In the center of the chamber was a circular area with smooth white floors. It looked like an arena. At one end stood a platform where Queen Vexa High sat on her throne. Her armor was shifting through colors Jake had never seen before, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The guards pushed Jake into the arena. His bare feet felt the cold of the white stone floor. The weight of hundreds of alien eyes pressed down on him. The sound of Zephyrian voices filled the air, rising and falling like the ocean. Queen Vex High raised one hand and the crowd fell silent. When she spoke, her voice echoed through the chamber. "Warriors of the Empire," she began, "today we have brought before you a specimen of the species that dares to resist our rule. This creature comes from a race that calls itself human." Hissing sounds came from the crowd. Jake realized they were laughing. The queen continued, "Look at this pathetic being. See how small it is, how weak. Its skin is soft and easily damaged. Its bones break under the slightest pressure. It has no natural armor, no claws, no real weapons of any kind." More laughter from the crowd. Some of the Zephyrians were pointing at Jake and making comments to each other. "Yet these humans continue to fight us," Vex High said. "They refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. They attack our ships with vessels that are clearly inferior. They defend colonies that cannot possibly be held." The queen stood up from her throne. She was even bigger than Jake remembered, at least 9 feet tall. Her armor had settled into a deep red color that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. "Some of you have asked why we have not simply destroyed this species and been done with it. The answer is that they fight like madmen, without regard for tactics or self-preservation. They cause us casualties far beyond what their military strength should allow." The crowd was listening more carefully now. Jake noticed that some of the laughter had stopped. "But today," the queen said, "we will demonstrate the futility of human resistance. This creature will kneel before the Empire and beg for mercy. When it does, you will understand that humans are nothing more than animals that have forgotten their place." 2 guards brought forward a metal device that looked like a collar with spikes pointing inward. Jake recognized it as some kind of torture device designed to force obedience. Queen Vex High walked down from her platform and approached Jake. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Her armor reflected the arena lights like a prism, throwing rainbow colors across the white floor. "Kneel, human," she commanded. Jake looked up at her. Despite his exhaustion and pain, his voice was steady when he spoke. "No," a murmur ran through. The crowd. The queen's armor flashed brighter red. You will kneel, or you will suffer pain beyond your imagination. Jake remained standing. I said no. The queen gestured to one of her guards, who brought forward a weapon that glowed with purple energy. She took it and aimed it at Jake. This will cause you agony, but not death. You will beg me to let you kneel. Go ahead and shoot, Jake said. But I'm not kneeling. Queen HFY hesitated. Something in Jake's tone seemed to puzzle her. She lowered the weapon slightly. You know you cannot win. You know you are going to die. Why do you continue this pointless defiance? Jake smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. You really don't. Understand, do you? Understand what? What you're fighting? What humans really are? The queen's armor shifted through several colors. Jake could see confusion in her multifaceted eyes. You think this is about military strength, Jake continued. You think it's about who has the better weapons or the stronger soldiers. But you're wrong. Then what is it about? The queen demanded. Jake looked around the arena at the hundreds of Zephyrian faces staring down at him. Then he looked back at Queen HFY. You want to know why you're losing this war? You want to know what you're really fighting? The queen leaned forward slightly. Despite herself, she was interested in his answer. You're not fighting the human military, Jake said. You're not even fighting human technology. You're fighting something you don't have and can't understand. And what is that? Jake's voice carried clearly through the silent arena. You're fighting the human heart. The queen stared at him. What does that mean? Jake straightened his shoulders, as much as his injuries would allow. It means every human who dies becomes a reason for 100 more to keep fighting. It means we don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because the people we love are depending on us. The arena was completely quiet now. Even the guards had stopped moving. You see war as a contest between armies, Jake continued, but to humans, this war is about whether our children will grow up free or in chains. It's about whether the people we care about will have a future worth living. Queen HFY's armor had shifted to a color Jake had never seen before. It was almost like silver, but it seemed to move and flow across her surface. You can kill me, Jake said. You can kill 1,000,000 humans, but you'll never kill what makes us fight, because that's not something you can destroy with weapons. He paused, looking directly into the queen's eyes. That's why you're losing. And that's why you'll keep losing, no matter how many battles you win. The silence in the arena stretched on. Jake could hear his own breathing and the distant hum of the ship's engines. Queen HFY stood motionless, her armor continuing to shift through that strange silver color. Finally, she spoke. Explain this human heart you speak of. Jake looked around at the thousands of Zephyrian faces staring down at him. He thought about Lisa's words about their culture, about how they only understood strength and dominance. Your species judges everything by physical power, Jake said. The strongest leads, the weakest serves. It's simple and it makes sense to you. The queen nodded slightly. This is the natural order. The strong survive and rule. The weak are protected or eliminated. But humans are different, Jake continued. We've never been the strongest species on our planet. We're not the fastest. We don't have the sharpest claws or teeth. For most of our history, we were prey animals. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The idea of a prey species becoming dominant clearly confused them. So how did we survive? How did we end up ruling our world? Jake asked. We learned to work together. We learned that a group of weak individuals could become stronger than any single powerful creature. Jake paused to catch his breath. The torture had left him weak, but his mind was clear. On Earth, We have creatures called wolves. They hunt in packs and can bring down animals much larger than themselves. But humans learn to do something even better. We learn to care for each other even when it cost us personally. The Queen's armor flickered. This makes no tactical sense. Caring for the weak reduces overall efficiency. Does it? Jake asked. Let me tell you about a human named Dr. Lisa Grant. She's in your prison right now. By your standards, she's weak. She can't fight, she has no armor, she's small and fragile. Then she is useless. Wrong. She designed the shield systems that protect our colonies. Her weak human mind created defenses that your powerful warriors can't break through easily. In human society, her brain is more valuable than 1,000 strong backs. Jake could see the confusion growing in the Queen's multifaceted eyes. This concept clearly didn't fit into her understanding of how things should work. We have humans who are blind, who can't see at all, Jake continued. By your standards, they would be disposed of as defective, but some of our best pilots are blind. They navigate using senses your people don't even have. Impossible. Is it? How many of your own people have you thrown away because they weren't strong enough to be warriors? How much intelligence have you wasted because it came in a weak body? The Queen's armor was now cycling through colors rapidly, something Jake had never seen before. He pressed on. But that's not even the real difference between us, he said. The real difference is what happens when one of us dies. Jake thought about the friends he'd lost on the Defiance. Stevens, who had been just a kid. Rodriguez, who had died trying to save everyone else. When a Zephyrian warrior dies, you replace them with another warrior. Same training, same role, same function. When a human dies, something unique is lost forever. And the humans who loved that person don't just replace them. They fight harder to make sure that death meant something. Love is weakness, the Queen said, but her voice sounded less certain than before. Is it? Let me tell you what happened after you destroyed the colony on New Perth. You killed 10,000 humans, mostly families. By your logic, that should have ended resistance in that sector. Jake managed to stand a little straighter despite his injuries. Instead, it created 50,000 new volunteers for the military. Every person who had family or friends on New Perth signed up to fight you. They didn't care about the odds. They didn't care that your ships were better. They cared about the people you killed. The arena was still completely silent. Jake could see that some of the Zephyrians in the crowd were leaning forward, listening intently. You see, Queen Vexhai, you made a mistake. You thought you were fighting the human government or the human military, but you're not. You're fighting human love. You're fighting the bonds between parents and children, between friends, between people who have chosen to care about each other. Jake's voice grew stronger as he continued. Every ship you destroy has people on it that someone else loves. Every colony you attack is home to people who matter to others. And when you kill them, you don't eliminate resistance. You create it. The Queen stepped closer to Jake. Her armor had settled into a deep blue color that seemed to pulse with uncertainty. But your military forces are small compared to ours. Your technology is inferior. Your weapons are less powerful. How can emotional attachments overcome such disadvantages? Because we're not just fighting with ships and weapons, Jake said. We're fighting with everything we have. The engineer who hasn't slept in 3 days because she's trying to design better armor for the next battle. The farmer who grows food for the military, even though his own family is hungry. The child who learns to build bombs because she wants to protect her little brother. Jake paused, thinking about how to make the Queen understand. In your society, everyone has a role based on their strength. The strong fight, the weak serve. But in human society, everyone fights in their own way. The weak find ways to be strong. The strong find ways to be stronger. This is inefficient, the Queen protested. A proper hierarchy ensures optimal use of resources. Is it inefficient? Your forces outnumber us 10 to 1, but this war has lasted 3 times longer than you expected. Your superior technology keeps running into human innovations you didn't. Anticipate. Your mighty warriors keep getting outmaneuvered by humans who shouldn't be smart enough to beat you. The Queen's armor flashed red again, but it was mixed with other colors Jake couldn't identify. You want to know the real truth? Jake asked. The truth is that you're not fighting 10 billion individual humans. You're fighting 10 billion humans, who are all connected by bonds you can't see or understand. When you hurt one, you make all of them stronger. Jake looked up at the thousands of Zephyrian faces surrounding him. That's why you're losing. Not because we're stronger than you, but because we're something you've never encountered before. We're a species that gets more powerful when it's hurt. We're a people who become more united when they're attacked. The Queen was quiet for a long time, her armor cycling through colors. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. And you believe this will continue? Even when we destroy your homeworld? Even when we eliminate your species entirely? Jake smiled sadly. Queen Vexhai, you still don't understand. You can't eliminate what we are. Because what we are isn't a place or a government or even a species, it's an idea. The idea that people who care about each other can accomplish impossible things. He looked directly into her alien eyes. And ideas, Your Majesty, are bulletproof. Queen Vexhai stood frozen in the center of the arena. Her armor had stopped shifting colors and settled into a pattern Jake had never seen before. It was like looking at liquid starlight, silver and white swirls that seemed to move independently of her body. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. His legs were shaking from exhaustion and pain, but he remained standing. Around them, thousands of Zephyrian warriors waited for their queen to speak. Finally, Vexhai turned away from Jake and looked up at her assembled forces. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone Jake had never heard from her before. It sounded almost uncertain. Warriors of the Empire, you have heard this human's words. What are your thoughts? A murmur ran through the crowd. Jake could see the Zephyrians turning to each other, their armor shifting through various colors as they discussed what they had heard. This was clearly not what they had expected from today's execution. One of the Queen's advisors, a large Zephyrian with gold-colored armor, stood up from his seat. My Queen, the human speaks of weakness as if it were strength. This is clearly a deception meant to confuse us. But another voice spoke up from across the arena. General Voxtar, consider this. The human fleets we have faced fight with a desperation we have never encountered before. They ram our ships when their weapons fail. They detonate their own vessels to damage ours. This is not normal military behavior. The general's armor flashed red with anger. It is the behavior of animals, not warriors. Is it? The Queen asked quietly. Or is it the behavior of beings who have something more important to them than their own lives? Jake watched the debate ripple through the arena. He could see that the Queen's words were having an effect. Some of the Zephyrians were nodding, thoughtfully. Others seemed disturbed by what they were hearing. A younger warrior near the front spoke up. My Queen, I have fought the humans in the Outer Rim. They do things that make no tactical sense. I once saw a human ship with no weapons left continue to attack us using nothing but their engines as battering rams. Madness, General Voxtar declared. Perhaps, the young warrior replied, but that mad attack allowed 3 transport ships, full of human civilians, to escape. The ship that attacked us was called the Sarah's Hope. Later, we learned that Sarah was the captain's daughter, and she was on one of the transports. The arena fell quiet again. Jake could see understanding beginning to dawn on some of the alien faces. Queen Vexhai walked slowly around Jake, her armor continuing to shift through that strange starlight pattern. Command General Korthax, report on our recent military actions. A massive Zephyrian with blue and black armor stood up. My queen, our forces have successfully destroyed 17 human colonies and captured 38 military vessels in the past month. And our losses. The general's armor flickered, with what Jake was learning to recognize as embarrassment. We have lost 41 ships and suffered casualties numbering in the thousands. Gasps echoed through the arena. Jake realized that this information had not been shared with the general population before. Explain to me, General, how a superior force suffers greater losses than an inferior enemy. General Korthax was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was troubled. The humans fight in ways we do not expect, my queen. They use tactics that should not work. They sacrifice valuable resources for minimal gains. They seem to value the survival of their weakest members over military objectives. And this confuses you? Yes, my queen. By all logical analysis, they should have surrendered months ago. Instead, their resistance grows stronger with each defeat. Queen Vexhai turned back to Jake. Human, you claim that love and emotional bonds make your species stronger. But these things also make you unpredictable, irrational. How can irrationality be a strength? Jake straightened as much as his battered body would allow. Because what you call irrational, we call loyalty. What you call unpredictable, we call creative. You fight the same way every time because that's what your training tells you to do. We fight differently every time because we're fighting for different reasons. Explain. The captain who rams his ship into yours isn't following military doctrine. He's thinking about his daughter on that transport. The engineer who designs a new weapon isn't working from a manual. She's thinking about her home that got destroyed. Every human you face is fighting their own personal war, and that makes us impossible to predict. Jake paused, gathering his strength for what he knew might be his final words. You want to know why you can't beat us? It's because you're trying to fight 10 billion individual wars all at the same time. And in each one of those wars, the human has more to lose than you do. Queen Vexhai stopped pacing. Her armor had settled into a deep purple color that Jake somehow knew meant deep thought. If what you say is true, then this war cannot be won through military force alone. That's right, Jake said. You can destroy our ships, our colonies, even our worlds, but you can't destroy what connects us. And as long as that exists, there will always be humans willing to fight you. The queen looked up at her assembled warriors. Leave us. All of you. The arena began to empty as thousands of Zephyrians filed out through the various exits. Soon only Jake and the queen remained in the vast chamber. Her armor had shifted to a soft blue color that seemed almost peaceful. Human? What is your name? Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison. In all my centuries of conquest, I have never encountered anything like what you describe. We have defeated species that were stronger than yours, more technologically advanced, better armed. They all eventually surrendered when faced with inevitable defeat. Jake nodded. Because they were fighting to survive. We're fighting for something bigger than survival. And what is that? The right to choose our own path. The right to protect the people we love. The right to be human in our own way. Queen. Vexhai was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. I have made a decision that will seem incomprehensible to my people. Jake Morrison, you and all human prisoners aboard this ship will be returned to neutral space immediately. Jake stared at her in shock. What? You will carry a message to your leaders. The Zephyrian Empire requests immediate negotiations for a ceasefire. I don't understand. Why? The Queen's armor shifted to that starlight pattern again. Because, Jake Morrison, you have taught me something I never expected to learn. You have shown me that there are different kinds of strength, and perhaps, for the first time in my life, I have encountered a strength that I cannot defeat. She turned and began walking toward her throne. My empire has always conquered through superior force, but you humans have something we do not. Something we have never developed. What's that? Queen Vexhai stopped and looked back at him. Hope, Jake Morrison. You have hope. Even in the face of certain death, even when everything seems lost, you still believe that tomorrow can be better than today. Jake felt tears running down his face. And you don't? We have never needed to. We have always been strong enough to take what we wanted. But now I wonder what we might have accomplished if we had learned to hope instead of simply conquering. Guards entered the arena and began escorting Jake toward the exit. As they reached the doors, the Queen called after him. Jake Morrison, tell your people that Queen Vexhai has learned the meaning of the human heart. Tell them that some battles are won not by being stronger, but by being willing to keep fighting for what you love. Jake looked back one final time. What will happen to you? Your people won't understand this decision. The Queen's armor shifted through several colors before settling on gold. Perhaps it is time for the Zephyrian Empire to learn something new. Perhaps it is time for us to discover what we might become if we chose hope over conquest. 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge of a human rescue ship as they approached the colony of New Boston. Behind them, the Eternal Dominion hung in, space, its weapons powered down in a gesture of truce. The communications officer looked up from her station with amazement. Sir, we're receiving broadcasts from all across human space. The news about the ceasefire is spreading faster than anything I've ever seen. Jake nodded, thinking about Queen Vexhai and her decision to choose understanding over conquest. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them that humanity has won its greatest victory not through superior firepower, but by teaching an enemy the power of hope. As the ship entered New Boston's atmosphere, Jake could see crowds gathering in the cities below. People were coming, out of their homes, looking up at the sky, celebrating news they had never dared to dream possible. The war was over. Not because humanity had proven stronger than the Zephyrian Empire, but because they had proven something far more important. They had shown that love, hope, and the determination to protect what matters most could achieve what no weapon ever could. In the end, it wasn't the human soldier who had been speechless. It was an alien queen who had finally learned what it truly meant to be strong.